If there is one thing I can promise when someone starts a new long-term campaign, it's that closure is never guaranteed. Most campaigns never find their end. Life gets busy, people move away, groups break up. Sometimes a few bad die rolls lead to a logical wipe of the whole party before the climax, and no one has the desire to force new player characters into the story. Worse yet, sometimes the game just gets stale and you move on to a new game or to a new hobby entirely. I say this not to discourage, but to highlight just how lucky it is to get a satisfying ending to a campaign. For life to allow it to happen. For all the players to be dedicated enough to make it work. For the players to have the courage to close the book when the story is over. Deliberate endings are a blessing. I've had many games just die. I've had a handful come to a story arc conclusion with downtime given before the next adventure, for the characters to never return from vacation. Through college, I was lucky enough to have a solid time allotment for games to come to a close before summer break. That said, no one really remembers what one of them was about, so I'm not sure if that one counts. Nevertheless, built-in endings can help improve the rates of completed games. Open-ended games take more luck. Over the course of 20 days through the new year, I had 3 campaigns come to their close. This was unplanned. They all started at different times, skipped different numbers of sessions. One was a homebrew, and out of the 2 campaign books, one skipped a bunch of material and the other did more quest points than expected, plus some custom ones on top. The first campaign had 2 separate finale battles, one for the collective quest plot and one for completing a player character's backstory and setting up a possible future campaign. These were followed by an epilogue episode. The second campaign got to the end of a campaign book for a 2-stage battle where the party had a layer actions in the first stage and the second stage culminated in a TPK. The final campaign finished their module in what can only be described as a Star Fox mission accomplished rather than a mission complete, followed by another epilogue. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on these endings. Many details will be missed, but hopefully seeing the broad strokes side by side may mean something. Unfortunately, this also means not all player characters will get the spotlight they deserve. Because 2 of the 3 campaigns were from official Wizards of the Coast products, there is a spoiler warning for both Princes of the Apocalypse and Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. While I won't be providing context for all of the references, they will be obvious enough to point them out in the story. I will be discussing Avernus first, Apocalypse second, and my homebrewed game last. As long as the spoiler warning is at the bottom of the screen, danger is present. To skip the spoilers for Descent into Avernus, jump to 5 minutes 50 seconds. To skip spoilers for the Princes of the Apocalypse, jump to 11 minutes 40 seconds. Let's start with the most recent ending and move backwards. Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus was a major accomplishment for myself and the party. Despite myself favoring milestone leveling progression, Avernus was a real-life reminder of the effects of experience and hardship and growth. Despite being an experienced GM, this campaign threw some traps and challenges at me that forced me to improve myself, and I am deeply thankful for my players' patience through the process. With their patience, they not only completed the adventure, but did so with flying colors. Both Elturel's people and the city itself were saved, the companion and demon zapper dealt with, and Zariel redeemed. The 2 plot-forward PCs through it all were Therish and Drevante. Therish was a conquest hexblade paladin that directly grappled with the plot's themes of redemption and damnation, after being tempted by a hidden pit fiend. She had a direct hand in absolving and punishing key NPCs that were under Zariel's influence, and eventually became the bearer of the angelic blade. Drevante, on the other hand, was an eloquence bard and initiate of Agma that did his best to talk his way through hell, and he did a very good job of it. In the end, it was his words and relations to the following of NPCs that the party had gained that broke Zariel's zeal. The party adopted a mentality of not giving up on someone unless there was no other choice, and held true to it even if taking that chance made their futures harder. While the campaign had a rough start, I am thankful that I was given the same opportunities for redemption that were explored in the narrative. I am especially thankful because I also know all of the ways the book outlines for failure. Finishing Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus in glory was a blessing. The next campaign I want to talk about had a very different ending. If you don't know, but are still listening for some reason, Princes of the Apocalypse focuses on 4 elemental cults trying to summon beings of elemental evil to destroy the world. The adventure leads players through discovering these cults, delving deep into their headquarters, defeating their prophets, and eventually staring down impending doom. I have already mentioned that this campaign ended in a total party kill during the final battle, but how we got there was a vast array of dominoes that started very early on. The main character you need to know about is Saktar. He was another eloquence bard, this one a tiefling. However, instead of multiclassing cleric, he multiclassed Great Old One warlock. More interesting than that is when he multiclassed. Princes of the Apocalypse is meant to start with level 3 characters. Because a majority of the players were fresh, we started at level 1 and played through some opening adventures the campaign book supplies. This decision changed the entire game. PC actions led the party heavily into relying on the Zentarum, the Black Network. More importantly, they leveled up to 3 upon completing the Lance Rock quest and discovering the Elder Elemental Eye. With Saktar leveling up into Great Old One at this exact moment, he handed me the wonderful gift of making his patron the Elder Elemental Eye itself. Now, the Elder Elemental Eye is not supposed to be an active factor in the campaign. It is a bit of lore to help explain why all 4 cults are together despite having rivalries and conflicts. One of the successful endings of the book finishes with this unknown threat of when the Elder Elemental Eye will stir again and with what greater forces it will do so. But here, early on, I was given this opportunity for it to be much more than that. What if the Eye doesn't want its cults to squabble? What if it wants a true avatar of its elemental chaos rather than just one of each cult's found princes? With that, a 5th cult was born, made up of betrayers of all 4 primary cults. With the pieces slowly being set up, the characters continued on against the haunted keeps, and eventually there was a PC death. Rather than accepting the death or retreating for a possible resurrection, the remaining PCs prayed out to the elemental entities to bring back the fallen. And the void beyond reality responded. With confusing warlock pacts made all around, the plot went from exterminating the cults to collecting their artifact weapons and allying with the betrayers. It was only after the Earth portal was closed that the party's motives separated from the betrayers. In the end, the party sparked the climax a level or 2 early. It started with an aerial battle with the Zentarum at Feathergale Spire against Yansi Bin. In defeat, the Air Prince was sucked south through the Sighing Valley into a binding ritual as the 4 betrayers merged the Air Prince with a red dragon whose crown of horns had the 3 remaining elemental weapons grafted in. The heroes and wounded Brass Dragon ally threw themselves against the betrayers and the twisted elemental chaos avatar. In the end, they fell. The corrupt avatar of elemental evil released on the world, but it was a valiant fight. I have probably spent over twice as long explaining this campaign than the first. This isn't to favor one over the other. The bulk of the interesting narrative of the Avernus game was character moments not tied to the ending. Here, though, so much of the game was changed by decisions along the way. The ending was fundamentally different than the written adventure expects. The players didn't even touch 2 of the major dungeons and most of the side quests. The story quickly stepped off the tracks, loosely followed them before exponentially leaving. And in the end, the PCs failed their quest. Where the Avernus game ended up being about my own learning and growth as a GM, and the characters ending the campaign with every gold star possible through their own merit, Princes of the Apocalypse was about me trusting in my own skill, in being able to follow those players' choices, allow consequences and repercussions to evolve the story, and let the dice fall where they may. When I started running games professionally, I began to question how much to give the players what they wanted. They are paying for an experience and paying to play the game. Does the exchange of money affect my judgment? Do I stick to the book and the exact wording of the rules and the expectations of a pre-made adventure? Or do I trust in my experience? Trust that my players are here for how I choose to run the game, and trust that in the end, the story will be a true merging of player choices, the roll of the dice, and honest creativity. This playthrough of Princes of the Apocalypse showed me that people were willing to come to the table and join me for my interpretation of their story, whatever that meant. The final campaign closure is actually the first one to happen through the new year. The story of Hidden Waters was a winding one. This homebrew campaign was the first professional game I started that was made up of players who did not know each other prior to playing. The table shifted considerably from beginning to end, with an initial table of 5 ending in a table of 4 with only 2 founding members. Because of this, the story prompts we started with shifted as players dropped and continued to shift, as one of the founding members had a character death. Halfway through the story, the game had become quite solidly centered around one character. We found moments for other characters to shine, but the central plot focused on a Triton by the name of Coralie, a follower of a crafting and seasoned sea goddess Thalassa. The plot revolved around an extraplanar threat that took her people's forge masters and required the reassembly of an ancient lost weapon to bring peace. The first climax battle was more party-centered on preventing the influence of the elemental chaos from breaking the planar barriers protecting the prime material. The second climax was character-centered on finally freeing Coralie's people, staring down this greater idol and bringing calm to the waters once more. If the Avernus ending was about redemption, and the Princes of the Apocalypse ending was about trust, what was the Hidden Waters ending about? I think it was about endings themselves. At the beginning of this entry, I talked about all of the ways a game can never reach a true ending. The 2 previous campaigns I outlined had pre-established friend groups, which made gaming easier to schedule and maintain. With Hidden Waters, none of the players had attachments to each other beyond their level of commitment to the game. To be able to collectively work towards an ending for a group of strangers was a gift. The opportunity to find this ending in particular was especially a gift from a single player to me. I mentioned that through a dozen happenstances, the plot started to focus on Coralie. Back in the autumn, Coralie's player told me that they had a wonderful opportunity arise in their life and that their schedule would shift in the new year. While a player leaving the table is never fun, this player gave me the gift of time to close a chapter of the story for this character. Ultimately, that gift of consideration allowed me to close out the entire arc. Would I have liked more time? Always. Always, always. I always want more time with our characters, our stories, our tables. But what I know with greater certainty is that closure is never guaranteed. And I was given that gracious gift of being able to find that closure for the table before it was taken from us. I am so lucky to have gotten the ending I did, and grateful that the player could recognize and appreciate what that was. 3 tables, 3 campaigns, 3 endings, all in the span of 3 weeks. So much of these stories have been glossed over, many characters left out. But that should be expected for something that happened over the course of the past year. People say, another year older, another year wiser. I certainly hope so. The year has brought experience, confidence, and completion. As an independent artist, all 3 are key. Learning as I move forward, fighting off doubt, but most of all, finishing. Incomplete is far too common a state. While I strive for everything to be a mission accomplished, a mission complete is infinitely better than not at all. With that in mind, I've probably prattled on for too long as it is. To paraphrase one of my campaign's closures, this is my SendingKenku. So, this is where we end our story. Not at the end of our heroes' lives, but at the beginning of lives truly their own.